Hey guys, welcome to another episode of SBX Tutorials. My name is Sinjo. I'm the head of sound for Swissbeatbox, and today I'll be showing you the brand new Boss RC-505 MKII Loop Station. First off, I'm not a looper, so I'm going to be talking a bit more about the audio specs in this device, as well as how to get a really nice basic sound for your raw solo beatboxing. One of the most incredible things about the new RC-505 MKII is the fact that it records at 32-bit floating point. To understand what this means, first I will explain the difference between 16-bit fixed point, 24-bit 6-point, and 32-bit floating point WAV files. Now, to keep things simple, 16-bit WAV files can store audio loudness levels from 0 decibels right down to minus 96.3 dBFS, which means basically that you have 96.3 decibels of dynamic range in your recording before digital clipping will occur. Now, 24-bit WAV files can store audio loudness levels from 0 dBFS down to minus 144.5 dBFS, which means you have 144.5 decibels of dynamic range before audio clipping occurs. 32-bit floating point takes us to a whole new level. Not to get too technical, but 32-bit floating point can store audio levels from 770 decibels right down to minus 758 decibels, giving you a dynamic range of 1,528 dBs. Since the loudest sound on Earth is around 210 decibels, this means that you can never digitally clip when recording at 32-bit floating point. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is because the RC-505 MKII records and operates internally at a digital rate of 32-bit floating point. Essentially, what this means is that you do not need to worry about gain levels when recording or looping at 32-bit floating point through the RC-505 MKII. All you need to do is set the relative levels between the tracks on the device, and then you can adjust the levels in your DAW later on. A DAW is a digital audio workstation, which is any kind of software you can use on your computer to record and edit audio files. This is an incredible upgrade in sound quality and also reduces relative noise floor on the RC-505 MKII, meaning everything will sound cleaner in general. The only thing you need to make sure of is whichever DAW you end up using has the capability of recording at 32-bit floating point, because not all DAWs are capable of doing this. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's dive into some basic settings to make your raw beatboxing sound better. Today, I will be using the DPA 2028 condenser mic with a windshield and a mic stand, and I will not be cupping the mic. Cupping the mic completely changes the frequency response of the microphone, and since the 2028 has an almost perfectly flat frequency response, I don't want to mess with this at all. Because of this fact, I don't need to do much EQing to get a nice sound from the mic, which frees up one of my input effects slots. Meanwhile, the windshield helps with the wind noise on the mic capsule, giving me a much cleaner sound overall. First off, I'm going to turn the machine on. Now, while this is loading up, open up your DAW of choice, your digital audio workstation, and let's make sure that we can get audio from the device into the recording software. To set the input in your DAW, we need to first switch the device to vendor mode. To do this, press the menu button, press the right arrow, press USB, then click the mode button to switch to vendor. After this happens, you will have to reboot the machine. To do this, just switch it off at the back, wait for it to boot down. Once it's turned off, we turn it back on again. Once it's booted up, we will see in our software that it's loaded up with 8 ins and 8 outs. When you use it in generic mode, it only has 2 inputs, left and right. So this gives you more flexibility with recording options. Now that the device is booted up again, open up your DAW, go to your preferences, open your audio device preferences, and make sure your input device is set to the RC-505 MKII. It should say next to it 8 ins and 8 outs. If it only says 2 ins, that means that it's still set to generic mode, so make sure you go back and you check that setting in the menu. Once the input device is set within your DAW, now we need to open a new recording track. Once that's opened, set the input to 7/8. This means that all of the input effects will be included in the process signal. So if you use 1 and 2 instead, you'll be getting the clean beatbox recording without any of the input effects being applied to the process signal. Also, make sure your DAW is capable of recording at 32-bit floating point. To do this, please read the user manual of your chosen DAW. Not all DAWs can record at 32-bit, so keep this in mind when choosing which recording software you would like to use. Now that we've got everything set up to record, plug in the mic into input 1 on the RC-505 MKII. Since I'm using a condenser mic, I'm going to have to first turn on phantom power. To turn on phantom power on the RC-505 MKII, click the menu button, click input, click setup, and then turn on phantom power for mic input 1. Now exit back to the main menu by clicking exit 3 times. As you can see now on the screen, it says P1. That means that phantom power is turned on for the mic number 1. Now, as I was saying before, we do not need to set gain on the mic because we're operating in 32-bit. But if you want to check the gain, click enter. This gives you a shortcut to the mixing screen. And here on mic 1, we can see the levels for the mic input number 1. To set the gain on mic 1, click the enter button, and that gives you a shortcut to the mixer window. In here, you can see the levels for each input. Because we're in mic 1, it's set to 100 as default. This is fine, you don't need to mess with this. If you really want, you can set the levels accordingly, but the default input of 100 is good. Now, let's set up some input effects to get your beatboxing sounding as nice as possible on the RC-505 MKII. First thing I'm gonna do is put on my headphones so I can hear myself. I've got nice level in here on the headphone output. First thing I want to do is set a compressor on input A. To do this, I'm going to hold the edit button, press A, and now I'm editing the input effects on slot A. Now that I'm on slot A, I'm going to press the A button to engage the effect. I'm going to scroll to the effect I want. As you can see, I was already on dynamics. And my favorite so far is the dance comp. Now, you can scroll through the different comps to figure out which one you prefer. I like the dance comp because it gives me a nice fat sound. I'm going to turn up the compressor, which it already was set to at +4, to give me a nice fat sound in the headphones. You can play around with these settings as much as you want. I had a bit of a play on it last night, and I found that the dance compression at +4 gave me a really nice sound. So because the DPA has such a nice frequency response, instead of an EQ, I will use the filter to create a bit of a bass boost on the signal. To do this, hold edit, press B, and scroll until you see HPF, which stands for high pass filter. For the rate, I'm going to use a setting of 0 with a depth of 41 and a resonance of 60. Now I'm going to scroll to the right and choose a cutoff of 0. What this is essentially doing is giving me a slight bass boost in the low frequencies to bring up the sub of my beatboxing. Now when I engage the effect, it sounds like this. See, you can get a bit more of a fatter sound when you engage the filter like this. And because of the flat frequency response of the mic, it already sounds very nice at the high end. Now that we have nice levels using the compressor and a bit of a bass boost using the filter, I want to give a bit of a distortion in there to fatten up the sound a bit. To do this, I'm going to load a distortion effect onto input effect C. You can do this by holding edit, press C, scroll through the effects until you get to distortion. For the type of distortion, I like to use the boost mode. For the tone, I'm going to give it -36, which concentrates the distortion on the lower end. You can also play around with this setting if you want to give a distortion more on the high end of the frequencies, go above 0. Just play around with the setting until you find something you like. For the distortion amount, I'm going to set it to 83. Once that's set, I'm going to go to the right arrow. And in here we have D level and E level. I'm going to set the D level to 50 and the E level to 35. D level stands for direct level, which means the level of the signal without the effect, and E level stands for effect level, which is the purely processed signal. So what this means is these two options allow me to create a blend of the dry signal and the processed signal together. These two options allow me to create a blend of the dry signal and the processed signal, which in this case is perfect as I just want to use the distortion to add a bit of grit to the sound without completely distorting the sound quality. Now that I've got the settings set up on the distortion, this is what it sounds like when I engage it. Finally, on input effect D, I have a reverb to add a bit of space to the mix. Now again, hold edit, press D, and then scroll through the effects until you get to reverb. Now that the reverb is there, I'm going to change the time to 2.3 seconds with a pre-delay of 5 milliseconds. The pre-delay basically tells the reverb to give a bit of time before it engages on the sound. The density I'm going to set to 8. Now scroll to the right. On the low cut, I'm going to set that to 315 hertz. What this does is it stops the low end from being included in the signal of the reverb. You don't want to use low end in your reverb as it muddies up the entire process signal. I'm also going to give a bit of a high cut down to 10 kilohertz just to take a little bit of the brightness out of the reverb. On the reverb, the D level is set to 100, which means we get the full process signal without reverb, and the E level I'm going to set to 11. Now that I've got the settings set up, this is what it sounds like with the reverb engage. That's it for now. Play around with these different settings in these effects, as each mic and setup is different, as well as every person's beatbox sounds different. So you'll need to work a little bit with the settings to figure out the best sound for your own beatboxing. Now, I hope this helps. If you need any more advice, please feel free to hit me up on my Instagram account, Sinjo_SBX, and I hope to see you in the next episode of SBX Tutorials.